Now, you may have heard your favorite guitar players or even teachers speaking about this phrase improvising, what it means, why it's so important, always harping on about it. Well, the truth is, improvising comes at a higher level than just someone who can play certain things on the instrument, play them reasonably well, maybe not understanding what it all means. A guitar player is someone that may have learned several things that sound impressive, but improvising is something different. Improvising is when you're headed towards being a musician. And I was thinking about this today that there's really two other fundamental aspects to it as well. There's the ability to compose music. That's one of them. To create something out of nothing by having this idea of chords, melody, rhythm, construction, and someone who's not a musician, just a guitar player messing around, they may stumble upon this by accident. They may stumble upon this idea of composing, creating by accident. But the thing with a musician is they can compose very reliably. They can compose very predictably, sit down and just do it. They don't happen upon it by accident because they have the ideas of what's going on. Now, there's something similar with composing and improvising, because improvising, you're creating on the fly. When you're composing, you're having all the time in the world to pace yourself and think about how you're going to put it together. Whereas improvising is just that, it's very spontaneous, it's instantaneous, and you don't really have time to process it. Now, I've spoken a lot about the third aspect, which is transcribing, which is being able to hear something and create that sound on your instrument. I've made that video recently. And it involves being able to, say, for example, document, okay, this is the chord sequence, this is the melody, this is the rhythmic notation, and things like that. That's transcribing. But the interesting thing is that these three pillars, I'll think of them as transcribing, composing, and improvising. You can't really work on one without improving on the other. Transcribing, working out what someone else has done, reveals so much about composing because, or gets your foot in the door with composing because you've worked out what someone else has done, song structure, chords. You can't help but get your foot in the door now with thinking, maybe how can I create my own compositions, because you've just broken down something someone else has done. Now all of a sudden you take that insight and apply it into composing, creating your own music. So there's different levels to musicianship, and just playing a few passages or interesting pieces on the guitar doesn't make you a musician. It really simply makes you a guitar player. And the more you follow this channel with the certain playlists and lessons, and if you really follow my playlist carefully, you're going to become an all-around musician whether you plan to or not, because that's just the kind of thought that goes into these lessons. You follow this channel very closely, you're going to become a full musician whether you want to or not. So I just wanted to give you that insight that when you're talking about the guitar, you may have learned a lot of different things to play and you may have them sounding really good, but without these other elements, you're not that kind of musician. You're a guitar player. A musician knows how to do things. They know how to compose. They understand that they can notate the rhythmic aspects to it, the melody, the chord sequences, what it all means, and the connections between everything. How realizing that scales and chords are very much connected to the rhythm. And when you're talking about composing, you're talking about creating something out of nothing. It's very deliberate. Whereas someone who messes around on the instrument, they may just very well stumble onto something. They might stumble onto this songwriting thing by accident, but no, a musician sits down and they can compose something. And with improvising, You're creating alternate routes. You have this knowledge of scales, chords, melody, rhythmic dynamics, to where you can branch out, do things differently within a particular piece of music, improvising. And then when you get into transcribing, you're able to recreate something that you hear because you have this internal knowledge of rhythmic concepts, chord sequences, melody. You're able to create those things on the instrument. When you think about composing, creating something out of nothing, you're crafting something that the average listener who knows nothing about the deeper aspects of music can hear, and they can say, okay, this sounds pleasant, this sounds sensible. And that's you, the composer, created that to where the average listener can get it, can understand it without having to think this is a jumbled mess or even have to understand it in a deeper level. They just know it makes sense because the composer has these kind of knowledge. So this is what separates a musician from just someone who plays, messes around on the instrument. And I'm not saying the things you've learned to play don't sound good. You can't get them sounding very good. I'm sure you can. But until you've delved into these three aspects, you're still at that basic level, really. And those three aspects are you're improvising, which everyone talks about a lot, but I don't think they've ever broken it down like this. You just kind of hear the phrase. And then transcribing, which I've talked about a lot, and then composing and seeing how they're all related. Because I don't believe you can work on one without getting better at the other. I don't believe you can work out somebody's song by ear and not have that give you insight into creating your own song. Now, there's certain things that are the more fun aspects of it, though. For a pure beginner that's just getting to a higher level or intermediate, transcribing and creating compositions, that might not be the most fun part to start out. So maybe the first one you can start out with would be the improvisation. Improvisation, knowing the relations between all these musical elements and picking a different route to play, to approach a certain musical situation. So I hope this helps. I may do a live video tonight showing how to play something note for note that I've been working on for about a month now. Like I said, learning pieces of music is not in and of itself going to make you a musician, but it will make you a guitar player. And this most recent song, it took me an entire month to get it out under my fingers. And to be honest, I thought it was going to take longer than that. I was thinking to myself, I was almost surprised that I got it down in a month, but it all just came together. You might find a piece of tabs online that you begin working out a song, and that's great. But just know that there's those three other underlying elements that completely differentiate someone who can play various things on the instrument, even make them sound really good, and someone who is a real and true musician. And the more you follow my playlist, like I said, the more you follow these lessons closely, I may have to make a new playlist, but especially playlists such as how to play guitar for beginners and stuff like that. You really follow those lessons. These concepts, these three things are really at the very foundation of this channel. So you can't possibly follow this channel and not become a real musician if you're really following it right and applying these things right, because these three pillars, the improvisation, the creating, and transcribing, working things out, it's all at the center, the heart, the core of this very channel on YouTube. So it would be impossible for you to follow this channel and really apply what I'm telling you and not become a real musician. So don't have this kind of fear, like, I've only learned how to play a couple things, I'm not a musician. The first step is understanding that there's these underlying elements: improvisation, composing, and transcribing. It's a trifecta of things that when you put time into one, you're going to benefit from the other. It's like this new song. I worked out little parts of it, and because they were all kind of similar yet different, the whole thing just kind of came together naturally in a snowball effect. And next thing you know, I had a whole new song. I didn't really need the tabs anymore. I didn't need the source material anymore. And once you have the greater understanding of the chord sequences, the melody, the rhythmic concept, you could begin improvising with the new song. Studying it, you could begin composing a song of my own. And I'll have better insight into working out future songs, which is transcribing, really listening. And so without those three elements, you're not really a high-level musician. You're just a guitar player, which is absolutely fine. Truly, it all comes down to the goals that you really have. There's a reason why a musician can create something that anyone walking down the street or in the grocery store can say, okay, this makes sense. The person listening doesn't need to know all the different musical theory aspects, but the musician has garnered all that information over time to where they're able to compose something like that. But I think the most fun part is improvisation, so I would start with that. That's where you get your foot in the door. Improvise. It's like thinking about what you're going to say next. You don't really have the time to think about it. You have a split second, and because of your knowledge of phrasing and your past experience, you're able to put something together because of your vocabulary and things like this. You're way better at speaking than you were as a kid. You're way better at processing responses and handling situations than you were before you even knew about language. So thank you guys. I hope this got the gears turning for you. I'll see you soon.